Hi everyone, it's Janani here with the best books that I read in 2022. I am so excited to be filming this video. I filmed this video for 2021 last year. Math. And I had such a blast. It's so fun to go through a list of all the books you read in the year. And for me, I'm someone who really associates books that I'm reading with like periods of my life. And this year has been such a big year for me. So the books that I read, which are in this lovely stack here, represent a lot to me. If you're new to this page, hello, I'm Maya. I'm a singer-songwriter and I love to write songs about what I love, which is books and stories and mythology and everything in between. If you listen to my music, it won't come as much of a surprise to you that I tend to read a lot. It is my primary mode of escapism, which I quite enjoy. And actually this year, the first song that I released was called Library Card, and it is all about my love of reading. Specifically how when you read a lot, your expectations for life become a little too high. I don't know if that's aggressively relatable for anyone watching. And so here are some of the books that made those expectations high. That was such a natural segue. A lot of books were read this year of varying genres. A lot of time was spent in Barnes & Noble. The Barnes & Noble Cafe, I have to say, is probably one of the most inviting places on planet Earth. You just buckle down there, you read a book for 6 hours. You get to like spy on what other people are reading and see if they're enjoying it by looking at their faces. I'm realizing, saying that out loud, that that's probably a little creepy. Anyway, shall we dive right in here? The first book I read this year, coincidentally, happens to be my favorite book of the year and possibly of all time. Circe by Madeline Miller. I know what you're probably thinking. Maya, you write songs about Greek mythology and about women specifically in Greek mythology, and you haven't read Circe by Madeline Miller? It's a good question. Part of the reason I only read it this year is because I knew that that book would change my life. I read Song of Achilles and it changed my life. And so knowing that there was a book out there about one of my favorite characters from Greek mythology, I had to wait until the moment was right. And in January of this year, I impulsively decided the moment was right. This book has to be one of the best books I have ever read. Madeline Miller's prose, again, unmatched. No one is doing it quite like Madeline Miller. The way that she's able to evoke the surroundings of Circe's island and make a plot that in theory is quite slow, feel very lively and action-packed, is a testament to her writing ability. I love everything that she added to the myths and the stories that are commonly associated with Circe to flesh out the character. I don't think I've loved a character as much as I loved Circe reading this book. Can I just say, without spoiling too much, that Madeline Miller weaves in a lot of other characters from Greek mythology that are not actually usually associated with Circe in the myths that are commonly spread about her. I love every decision that she made. Again, without going into detail. It just all felt very authentic to Circe's character. Also by Madeline Miller, looking for it right now in this pile of books. This very cute short story called Galatea. I love how small it is. When I went to Barnes & Noble and I asked for this and they gave this to me, I was like, oh, is it half off? Not a good joke. I will say I liked Circe more, obviously probably because it's more fleshed out. It was like a full novel as opposed to a short story, but her prose really shines through. I love how she's able to humanize women from Greek mythology and give them these really rich internal lives while also making the story interesting. Like a lot is happening in these stories. Also in a similar vein to Circe is this book, K by Vaishnavi Patel. Also easily one of my favorites from the year. The author of this book and I actually connected over Instagram, and she sent me this copy of the book. What? Thank you, Vaishnavi, for the copy of this. This book literally changed my life. This book is a retelling of the antagonist of the Ramayana, which is a Hindu epic. In the common Hindu imagination, Kaikeyi is often regarded as a really cunning, evil woman. She's jealous of Rama's success in the kingdom, and so she sends him off to exile so that her own son can succeed. This novel did an incredible job retelling the story similar to Madeline Miller in a way that felt fresh and exciting, but also really humanized Kaikeyi's character. And it generally takes a really nuanced perspective on the culture and tells the story in a way that is very empathetic to women. Speaking of powerful women, after reading some novels this year about women in mythology, I was so blown away and inspired that I actually ended up writing a song called Golden Age about women throughout history and mythology who haven't gotten what they were due and whose reputations have been twisted to fit a male narrative. That song has some of my favorite lyrics of the year. It actually directly references Circe from Greek mythology and Sita from Hindu mythology. And I'm just so proud I got to put it out. And I just want to thank the authors of the books that I read this year for helping inspire a musician to write one of their favorite songs. It's so cool when art informs art. Anyway, I could talk about this for hours. Speaking of women, I discovered this incredible small bookstore close to my new apartment this year that sells a lot of academic texts for a really affordable price. One is called Adam's Rib and touch on the stereotypes that women face in society. And this is just a shout out to your local used bookshop. You're not getting the same kinds of releases or new titles that you might get if you walk into a Barnes & Noble, but you're finding a lot of old gems. And can I just say, they're usually really affordable. And so if you're someone who buys a lot of books, that might be a great option to try out. Also at the used bookshop, I found this book of Arthurian legends, stories of King Arthur. I thought it was super fun. Arthurian mythology is an area that I would love to learn more about as someone who's really inspired by mythology. So it was great reading some of these stories. Okay, time for more fiction. Speaking of libraries and bookshops, I read The Invisible Library by Genevieve Cogman this year, and actually another book with library in the title called The Midnight Library. I loved this novel. It was really action-based, and I loved that it had a strong female protagonist. But I will say the book that really blew me away was The Midnight Library. The Midnight Library, without spoiling too much, is a book about a woman who's able to experience parts of her life from different perspectives. And again, it deals with this concept of the butterfly effect. I love novels about the butterfly effect. I recommended a title last year by Max Berry about a similar concept. I feel like in The Midnight Library, you really understand how these small decisions you make in your daily life can really accumulate into big effects. As someone who deals with a lot of anxiety about regret, it was actually kind of life-changing. And it just goes to show you that things happen for a reason, and you have to own your decisions and own the life that you've built for yourself. For those of you who might not know, I'm really into the dark academia aesthetic. And so a book that I read this year that I actually really enjoyed was called The Atlas 6. I really liked it. I felt like the prose was a little long and complicated at times. As someone who was raised by Rick Riordan, I'm saying that figuratively, I just really like the Percy Jackson books. I like in novels where the plot is really busy for the prose to complement it. But that being said, I do love long, flowy prose, and I felt like the plot of the Atlas 6 well compensated for any issues I had with the writing. It kind of had everything that I love. It has an enemies to lovers, specifically academic rivals to lovers, which is elite, a dark academia aesthetic, a really engaging plot, and a competition at the heart of the plot that had twists and turns you weren't expecting. Another book in that world that I read this year that people have literally been recommending to me for I can't even imagine how long is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is kind of the grandmother of all dark academia books, and I understand why. The prose is phenomenal. I think the pacing is really strong so that the prose never feels like too much. I will say though, there's something about this book that I couldn't get into 100%. It was amazingly written. The plot was great. It's just a little too unrealistic for me to have really sunk my teeth into. If you've listened to any of my songs, you might know that I'm kind of a hopeless romantic. Of course, I read a lot of romance this year, but the two books that really stuck out to me are Dating Dr. Dill and The Love Hypothesis. I am incapable, I think, of really talking about how the love hypothesis altered my brain chemistry, so to speak. I actually got to hear Ali Hazelwood talk about the book at the Los Angeles Book Festival, and it was so exciting to hear her talk about the conception of the novel and how she kind of came up with the idea during her own experiences in grad school. There's just something about the premise of the love hypothesis that works for that novel. The fake dating doesn't feel stale or overused. The man falling first feels really natural. The prose is quirky, but in a way that you really appreciate and enjoy. I didn't think I would enjoy the book as much as I did, and now I recommend it to everyone who kind of wants like a romance fix. That being said, I read Love on the Brain, which is the book that Ali Hazelwood released after The Love Hypothesis. Still a phenomenal book. I just think that the things that worked for The Love Hypothesis worked for The Love Hypothesis more than they worked for the other novel. But still a good read. The prose, again, is engaging, and I enjoyed it. Speaking of good plots, this was a favorite of mine this year. Seriously, I'm blown away by this novel. It's called The Plot. I got it at an airport bookstore, and I'm so glad I did. I judged a book by its cover for this one. Well, I guess by the title, because I thought it was really interesting. It's called The Plot. Without giving away too much, this book is about a plot for a novel that's so good that people go to great lengths to steal it, and it kind of uncovers the truth behind the plot throughout the story. I love a good thriller that you can just turn your brain off to read, and this one really qualifies as that. The plot was engaging. no pun intended. And it takes you through these twists and turns with a lot of ease. It's not the kind of novel that I'm like staying awake until 4 a.m. thinking about because it affected the depths of my soul, but it was so engaging. It kept me on the edge of my seat, and I have to say I loved it. Currently halfway through this novel, Daisy Jones and the Six, and I'm so excited about the TV adaptation that is coming out next year. I really like it. I don't think I liked it as much as other people liked it, which is totally fine. Taylor Jenkins Reid is a phenomenal author. I guess I just didn't like the format as much as I like some of her other novels. But I am still excited about the TV adaptation. Okay, now comes the part of the video where I talk about all the books I reread this year. The Maze Runner, the entire Percy Jackson Heroes of Olympus series, literally like the entire series I reread this year. Shouldn't come as too much of a surprise. And a book by one of my favorite authors ever, An Abundance of Catherines by John Green. This is one of my favorites from John Green. I actually got to meet John Green at VidCon and tell him face to face how much his books have affected my life. So that was such a special experience. A couple of other books I reread actually correlate to my debut EP, Poetic License, which came out this year. The theme of the EP was that every song takes poetic license with a touchstone of the Western canon, a well-known story or novel or piece of mythology that makes up our understanding of what literature and storytelling is. So for example, my song Three Spectres makes reference to A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens and the ghosts of the past, the present, and the future. My song Two Roads, unsurprisingly, is about A Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. My song Rome is about Rome. And so I reread all of Robert Frost's poetry this year to prepare myself to write Two Roads. I reread Macbeth and A Christmas Carol, both stories that involve three supernatural characters, to write my song Three Spectres. My song Golden Age makes reference to Little Women, Hindu mythology, and Greek mythology, so I reread a lot of catch-up books to write Golden Age. As someone who loves songwriting and book reading, it was literally such a treat to study books to write a song. I hope I get to do that for the rest of my life. It was so fun. My two nonfiction choices of the year are actually both really similar to each other. I watched The Dropout. Oh my gosh, can I just say Amanda Seyfried is the coolest person ever. I'm obsessed with her portrayal of Elizabeth Holmes. I'm fascinated by the story of Theranos. For people who might not know, Theranos was a massive fraud, and it's just fascinating to think about how these fraudulent corporations gain so much power. And so I read two books this year. One, Bad Blood by John Carreyrou, who was the journalist who exposed the Theranos scandal. So it's fascinating to read all these firsthand accounts of how that happened. A similar story is the story of WeWork, the cult of We. Still an up and running corporation, actually, and just how it kind of gained this cult-like philosophy over the course of its growth. I don't usually read a lot of nonfiction because I love fiction too much, but those two books were really engaging, and honestly, I shouldn't say this, but they kind of read like fiction. So I really enjoyed them. That is it, my beautiful friends, for my 2022 recap of books I read. It has been such a pleasure to write songs and stories for you this year, and I hope I get to see you next year with my 2023 book recap. I can't believe that. I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, this year has been probably one of the best years of my life. I got to release music I'm seriously so proud of. I did my first ever live show. I released my debut EP, and these are all milestones that I'm fully aware wouldn't happen without you guys there to support me every step of the way. You all are the reason that I make music, and I'm just so excited for what the next year will bring. In the meantime, J Maya here. I love you so much. Mwah! Read some good books for me before 2022 is over. Okay, see you soon.